Hey guys, I know I haven't been recording on my vlog channel. Yeah, you can definitely tell. But I decided to bring it back, and because I have a few older videos to show you guys. And yeah, you've probably already seen them, but for now, because I don't want to do anything, I'm going to show you guys my Linux experience. So again, from these videos, you can already tell that I am a Linux user now. Tux the Penguin is the logo of my OS, even though I still use Windows. Oh, not right now. Said not right now, Windows Defender. But anyway, today's not about Windows, it's about Linux. And I have a little unfortunate surprise at the end. Now, at first, I didn't remember when I switched to Linux, but after looking at my photos, February 16th is when I officially switched to Linux. And my first experience with the terminal, I was like, there's nothing really cool about the terminal until I discovered something called NeoFetch. I know some people use FastFetch, but I just wanted to go with what I already knew. So I went NeoFetch, and I was like, wow, you could get the specs from the computer like that? And that's when I found out that this only has a measly ½ terabyte of storage. It's better than my ¼ terabyte storage on my main computer. And that's when I realized, why do I need a terabyte on my computer, let alone my laptop? Again, I'll come back to that later. Anyways, more about the terminal. I remember I found out about something called Legacy iOS Kit, and I tried using it on my Windows computer, but then I realized that PowerShell and Command Prompt don't actually support Legacy iOS Kit, only Mac and Linux. And when I busted out the Linux computer, I was like, oh, something good for the terminal other than NeoFetch. And I used it to jailbreak not only my iPod, but also CJ's. And now, onto the Fedora phase, because I actually used Fedora Cinnamon once, and I used it for about a month until I was asked by my friend Christian, again, you've seen him in many of my videos, including the vlog videos, that he needed to sideload an app called iPogo on his iPhone 11. There was no good sideloader on the Linux computer that wasn't Legacy iOS. And so what I decided to do was get rid of the Fedora partition and start using Windows. But it wasn't permanently, because I only needed to sideload an app. And because this computer is horrible on Windows 11, I had to install Tiny 11. And then I used it for about 4 days, because, of course. And then I switched to Ubuntu 26.04. And in fact, it just released right after I finished the whole iPogo thingy. But the thing about that is that it only lasted for 3 days until I realized, can I get a decent Windows experience on this laptop? And so that's when I discovered something called Windows 10 LTSC. And so I decided to install it on here. And I used it for about, I don't know, half a month. And it was just as bad as Tiny 11 on this, but it was a teensy-weensy bit better. And a teensy-weensy bit more usable than 11. But then eventually I was reeled in back by Linux and reinstalled Ubuntu. And now it's time to talk about distros. I don't need any distromancers being like, you should have used Debian, you should have used Arch, you should have used Linux Mint. Instead of all of those, I chose Fedora initially. Well, not initially. I chose Fedora because of its cinnamon flavor. And the reason why I chose the cinnamon flavor is because it's similar to Windows. But then I realized, this is too similar to Windows. I wanted the true Linux experience. I wanted to use both Windows and Linux, not Windows Linux. Which is also why I do not like Linux Mint. And I know there were other flavors of Fedora, but they were too complex. I was also thinking about switching to Arch. And I tried it for a day and I was like, this is pretty good. I also tried looking into other options. I thought about ParaOS because, of course, I'm an iPhone user. But then I was like, no, this is just a cheap copy of macOS. If I want a Mac, I'm going to get a Mac. And I know this is surprising because I very much hate Linux Mint. I was initially thinking about switching to Linux Mint. But then, again, the community of Linux Mint users, the nasty green color, and that weird logo. I know it's supposed to say LM and LG tried it, but they could try it a bit better because it looks like a snail. Come on. How are you supposed to advertise your OS as a snail? People are going to think it's slow. I was like, nah, I'm not gonna choose Linux Mint. And it's always the Linux Mint users for some reason that always hate on Windows. Oh, you use Windows? Why not try Linux? Oh, I've heard about it, but I don't really want to switch. I'm too used to Windows. Oh, you're a Windows user? You use that Microslop trash with a bunch of bloatware and stuff? Get rid of that slop and use Linux. No! And that's when it hit me. If Fedora was too similar to Windows and its other flavors were kind of ugh, if Debian was too old, if Arch was too different, and if Parallels was too Mac-like, and if Linux Mint was too toxic, I was like, you know, I'm just gonna go back to the flagship Linux distro. The Linux distro most Linux users use, Ubuntu. I went back to Ubuntu, even though it's basically the start of Linux. It is very reliable. I really love Ubuntu. And that also brings me to this cool story because when I switched back to Ubuntu after coming back from Windows and Fedora, I remember I was booting up my computer and this kid from close African descent, this classmate, he noticed the computer and says, "Do you know what Ubuntu means?" And I was actually kind of interested. I was like, wait, what does it mean? He told me it actually means people in, what language? The Zulu language. Which kind of makes sense because their own design flavor that they used back then was called Unity. And now brings me with the problem. Remember, I removed the screws to open up the laptop and see what was inside so I could see what's wrong with the clickers. I removed the hard drive and the RAM stick, and when I put the hard drive back, I forgot that I actually dropped the hard drive, which means it's no longer usable. And I don't have an extra hard drive, which means I unfortunately cannot use Ubuntu anymore because this computer keeps on boot looping every single time I try to boot into it. Because the OS is missing. And when I try to reinstall Ubuntu or any flavor of Linux, it just boots and boots and boots and just doesn't start at all. And you might say, why not get a new hard drive? Or possibly better, an SSD. I do not have any money. So unfortunately, I can't use Linux anymore. I can. I actually have used Linux. And next, with dual booting, although it's only an 8 gig partition on my main computer. And it's only temporary because once I get the SSD for this laptop to replace the broken hard drive, I'm gonna get rid of the Linux partition and go full Windows on my main PC. Yes, I know Tux is here, but it's because it's a pin. And I just had to be a bit decorative and place the pin in the frame of the computer. But anyways, thanks for listening to the story vlog. And so with that, thank you guys for watching. Comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.